listen to me carefully because this might change how you see everything. A man who ignores you is not in control. He's actually revealing his greatest weakness. C, a strong man communicates. A real man shows up. A real man doesn't leave you guessing, confused, or questioning your worth. But the man who ignores you, he's doing it for a reason. And it ain't strength, it's fear. Yeah, fear. Fear of being vulnerable. Fear of accountability. Fear of not being enough. So instead of stepping up like a man, he steps back, hides, and uses silence like it's power. But let me tell you something. Silence is not power when it's used to manipulate. That man thinks if he pulls away, you'll chase him. He thinks if he ignores you, you'll start doubting yourself. He believes distance gives him control. But what he doesn't understand is this: a high-value woman doesn't chase confusion. She replaces it with clarity. See, his greatest weakness is not ignoring you. It's the reason why he does it. He lacks emotional maturity. He lacks consistency. And most importantly, he lacks the courage to meet you where you stand. Because when a man knows your worth, he doesn't risk losing you. Let me say that again. When a man truly values you, he doesn't play games with your time, your heart, or your attention. So if he's ignoring you, don't see it as rejection. See it as revelation. He's showing you exactly who he is without you even asking. And here's the powerful part. You don't respond with anger. You don't respond with begging. You don't respond with chasing. You respond with silence of your own, but not from pain, from power. Because the moment you stop reacting, you take your power back. And that's when it hits him. That's when he hits him. That's when he realizes he lost something real. But by then, you've already moved on, stronger, wiser, and no longer available for half-hearted love. Let's get something straight right now. When a man ignores you, that is not power. It may look like control on the surface. It may feel like he's the one with the upper hand. But in reality, it is one of the clearest signs of weakness. A strong man doesn't hide behind silence. A strong man doesn't disappear when things get real. Strength is about facing situations directly, even when it's uncomfortable. But a man who ignores you, he's avoiding something. And avoidance is not strength. It's fear in disguise. This is something Steve Harvey often emphasizes in his talks about relationships. Real men step up. They communicate. They handle their responsibilities, especially when it comes to emotions and commitment. But a man who chooses to ignore instead of communicate is showing you that he lacks the emotional tools to deal with real connection. Think about it. Communication requires courage. It takes effort to express how you feel, to explain your actions, or even to admit when you're wrong. That's not easy for everyone. So what does a weak man do instead? He takes the easy way out. He goes silent. He pulls away. He avoids the conversation entirely because he doesn't know how to handle it. And here's where many people get it twisted. They think, maybe he's ignoring me because he's busy, or maybe he's space, or worse, maybe I did something wrong. But no, when ignoring becomes a pattern, it's not about you. It's about his inability to show up properly. A man who is emotionally strong will never leave you confused about where you stand. Even if he needs space, he will communicate that clearly. Even if he's going through something, he will respect you enough to let you know. That's what maturity looks like. But ignoring you, that creates confusion. It creates anxiety. It makes you question yourself. And sometimes that's exactly what a weak man relies on. Because when you confuse, you're easier to control. Let's be real. Ignoring is often a passive way of manipulating a situation. Instead of having a difficult conversation, he lets silence do the work. Instead of being honest, he disappears and waits for you to react. That's not leadership. That's avoidance. That's avoidance. And here's the truth most people don't want to accept. A man who ignores you is not protecting his peace. He's protecting his ego. He doesn't want to be challenged. He doesn't want to be held accountable. He doesn't want to face the possibility that he might have to grow. So instead, he chooses distance. But distance doesn't make him strong. It exposes his limitations. When you understand this, everything shifts. You stop seeing his silence as something powerful, and you start seeing it for what it really is, a lack of emotional strength. And once you see that clearly, you stop chasing answers from someone who doesn't have the capacity to give them, because real strength isn't found in ignoring someone. Real strength is found in showing up, being honest, and handling things like a grown man, even when it's hard. And if he can't do that, then his silence isn't your loss. It's his weakness being revealed. Let's go deeper into this, because understanding the why will change how you react forever. When a man ignores you, it's easy to label him as careless, arrogant, or even manipulative. And sometimes he might be. But more often than people realize, the root of that behavior is something much weaker: fear and emotional immaturity. See, emotional maturity is not about age. It's about how a person handles feelings, conflict, and responsibility in relations. And a lot of men, even grown men, have never been taught how to process emotions in a healthy way. That's something Steve Harvey has talked about many times. Men are often raised to suppress emotions instead of understanding them. They're told to be strong, don't cry, don't show weakness. So what happens when real emotions show up in a relationship? They don't know what to do with them. And instead of facing those feelings, they avoid them. Ignoring you becomes a defense mechanism. It's not that he doesn't feel anything, it's that he feels too much and doesn't know how to handle it. So rather than risk saying the wrong thing, rather than risk being vulnerable, rather than risk being rejected or exposed, he shuts down. That's fear. Fear of vulnerability is one of the biggest reasons a man will pull away. Because being open means you can be hurt. It means you can be judged. It means someone can see your flaws, your insecurities, your weaknesses. And not every man is strong enough to handle that level of exposure. So he chooses silence instead. But let's be clear, silence is easier than honesty. It takes courage to say, I'm confused. It takes courage to say, I don't know what I'm feeling. It takes courage to say, I'm scared of losing you. A mature man will say those things, even if his voice shakes. An immature man will disappear and hope the situation resolves itself. Another layer to this is fear of accountability. When a man knows he hasn't been consistent, hasn't been clear, or hasn't treated you the way you deserve. Facing you means facing his own behavior, and that's uncomfortable. So instead of owning up to it, he avoids you. Ignoring becomes a way to delay consequences, but avoidance doesn't solve anything. It only creates more confusion and distance. And here's where emotional immaturity really shows itself. An immature man prioritizes his comfort over clarity. He would rather leave you guessing than have one honest conversation that might feel uncomfortable. Think about that. A person who values you will not put their temporary discomfort above your emotional peace. But someone who lacks emotional growth will do exactly that. Not because they're evil, but because they haven't developed the ability to handle difficult emotions in a healthy way. And this is important for you to understand. You cannot fix someone's emotional immaturity. You cannot teach someone to be ready if they're not willing to grow. No amount of patience, love, or understanding will turn fear into strength unless that person chooses to face themselves. So when a man ignores you, don't immediately internalize it as rejection. Recognize it for what it is, a reflection of his emotional limits. He's not showing you your worth. He's showing you his capacity. And once you understand that, you stop trying to prove yourself to someone who is emotionally unequipped to meet you where you are. Because love requires presence, and presence requires maturity. And if he's not there yet, his silence is simply evidence of the inner work he hasn't done. Now let's talk about something that a lot of people feel, but don't always recognize clearly. Silence is not always innocent. Sometimes silence is strategy. When a man ignores you repeatedly, it's not always because he's confused or busy. In many cases, it becomes a subtle form of manipulation, a way to control the situation without saying a single word. And that's what makes it dangerous, because there are no harsh words to point at, no clear argument to respond to, just absence, and that absence starts to affect you mentally and emotionally. This is something Steve Harvey often hints at when he talks about games in relationships. He makes it clear when someone is serious about you, they don't play games. But when they are unsure, insecure, or trying to maintain control, they use tactics. And silence can be one of the most powerful tactics of all. Here's how it works. When he ignores you, your mind starts racing. Did I say something wrong? Is he losing interest? Should I text him again? Maybe I need to fix this. And just like that, the focus shifts from him to you. You start overthinking. You start chasing clarity. You start putting in more effort to reconnect. And without realizing it, you've stepped into a position where he holds the emotional power, not because he earned it, but because he created confusion. That's manipulation. Not always loud, not always intentional. Not always intentional, but very real. Because control doesn't always come from what someone says. It often comes from what they withhold. A man who understands this, even on a basic level, may use silence to test you. He wants to see if you'll chase him. He wants to see how much you're willing to tolerate. He wants to know if he can disappear and still have access to you whenever he returns. And if every time he pulls away, you run back trying to fix things, you unknowingly teach him something that he doesn't need to show consistency to keep you. Now let's be honest. Not every man is consciously sitting there planning this like a game. But behavior patterns still create the same effect, whether intentional or not. If he ignores you and you reward that behavior with more attention, more effort, and more emotional investment, the pattern continues. And that's how manipulation becomes a cycle. The silence creates anxiety. The anxiety creates pursuit. The pursuit reinforces his behavior. And around it goes. But here's the truth that breaks the cycle. Manipulation only works when you respond the way it expects you to. The moment you stop reacting emotionally to his silence, the dynamic changes. Because now, his silence no longer controls you. You're no longer chasing answers. You're no longer trying to decode his behavior. You're no longer available for emotional confusion. And that's when the power shifts back to you. See, healthy communication brings clarity. It brings stability. It makes you feel secure. But manipulative silence does the opposite. It keeps you uncertain, off balance, and constantly seeking reassurance. And a relationship built on that kind of uncertainty is not a healthy one. So when you recognize silence as a pattern, not a one-time situation, but a repeated behavior, don't ignore what it's showing you. Because silence when used like this, is not peaceful. It's controlling. And once you see it clearly, you stop responding to it and start respecting yourself instead. Now let's talk about what real strength actually looks like. Because once you understand this, you'll stop being impressed by silence and start valuing something far more powerful: consistency and communication. A real man does not leave you guessing. He doesn't make you question where you stand in his life. He doesn't disappear and then reappear like nothing happened. And most importantly, he doesn't expect you to accept confusion as a normal part of love. A real man communicates. That doesn't mean he's perfect. That doesn't mean he always says the right thing. But it does mean he makes the effort to be clear, honest, and present, even when it's uncomfortable, even when the conversation is difficult. This is something Steve Harvey emphasizes strongly. A man who values you will make his intentions known. You won't have to decode his behavior, analyze his silence, or guess his feelings. His actions will match his words. And that's where consistency comes in. Consistency is one of the most underrated qualities in relationships, but it's also one of the most important, because anyone can show up once. Anyone can say the right things in the beginning. Anyone can give attention when it's convenient, but consistency, that requires discipline. That requires intention. That requires emotional maturity. Consistency means he shows up not just when he feels like it, but because he chooses to. It means his behavior doesn't leave you confused from one day to the next. It means you don't feel like you're dealing with two different people, one who cares deeply and one who disappears without explanation. A real man understands that communication builds trust, and trust is not built through occasional effort. It's built through repeated, reliable actions over time. Think about how different that feels compared to someone who ignores you. When a man communicates, you feel secure. When he's consistent, you feel valued. When his actions align with his words, you feel respected. But when he ignores you, everything becomes uncertain. You start questioning things you never used to question. You start doubting your place in his life. And slowly, that lack of consistency begins to drain your emotional energy. And here's the truth. Love is not supposed to feel like confusion. Yes, relationships take effort. Yes, there will be challenges. But a healthy connection should not leave you constantly wondering if you matter. A real man doesn't risk losing a good woman over poor communication. If he cares, he shows it. If something is wrong, he addresses it. If he needs space, he explains it. That's maturity, that's leadership, that's emotional strength. And let's be clear, consistency is not about perfection. It's about reliability. It's about knowing that even on his worst days, he still respects you enough to communicate, because anyone who truly values you understands one simple thing. Silence creates distance, but communication builds connection. So when you're dealing with someone who ignores you, don't compare his behavior to your expectations. Compare it to the standard of what a real man does. And a real man doesn't leave you in the dark. He shows up with clarity, honesty, and consistency every single time. And once you experience that kind of energy, you'll never again settle for someone who thinks disappearing is acceptable. Because now you know the difference between attention and intention.